Good morning, everyone. I guess this session will be live streamed. Is it live streamed?
No, not live.
No, just taped. Okay. My name is Tracy Wodach. I'm with the Connecticut Association for Healthcare at Home. I've seen many of you in the session so far. And welcome to the art of it all, the little things that really do matter. Speakers are Diana Molloy, Director of Viata Home Health Care, and Carrie Smith, Clinical Manager at Beacon Hospice. As you know, the drill, the CEU sheets are roaming around the room, so please make sure you fill them out. And just so, because I know you'll want to get going at the end, we do have time with our exhibitors and a break that's about an hour long between this one and then the next breakout session that will start at 11:45. So a little description about today's program. After 20 years of treatment for prostate, lung, kidney cancer, and related complications, a patient, his wife, and hospice nurses worked together to assure that the end-of-life experience was what the patient truly wanted. This session will describe the priorities and processes that worked best for that patient. You will learn to identify the key factors that matter most and how to incorporate changes in the plans of care that use patient-centered, SMART goals to improve patient satisfaction with end-of-life care. Please join me in welcoming Diana and Carrie.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. Carrie and I have talked several times over the last year and a half and trying to figure out how do we share what it is that we learned from each other and from our mutual patient. I have been at Viata for 4.5 years doing home health, but I've worked in home health off and on my whole career, as well as acute care and a little bit of skilled facilities, but not hospice directly. So having some help toward the end of life with my husband was something I knew I needed. Having advocated for him for 20 years in healthcare situations, it wasn't going to be easy. So, and I've been a nurse for, well, we'll go the 30 plus, how's that? And Carrie, how long have you been doing this?
I've been a nurse for 5 years, but in the hospice field for 3.5. I went to nursing school to be a maternity nurse, and I graduated as a hospice nurse. So
I don't know how that. This is a picture of our mutual patient, Tom. Always had a smile on his face, and no matter what, had a positive attitude. So today, we are doing a little bit of PDGM because we're really talking about a patient-driven care plan. Like it or not, Carrie and I realized that it was about the patient. And so we're going to focus a little bit on the art of the things, and don't want to lose that perspective in the midst of all our talk of reimbursement and all. And some of the highlight topics are really communication, doing it his way, the trust, connection, respect, the level of detail, and advocacy. And as mentioned a little bit, Tom had prostate cancer, was diagnosed in 1998. It was very early on the internet and didn't find a whole lot as far as what did that mean. So in 1998, we really didn't know what that meant. And he got connected up with Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston for his care, and ultimately received, up until the end, all of his care up there. He was diagnosed in 2005 with kidney cancer that his perspective is really saved his life, because the kidney cancer had already metastasized to his lungs and was really pretty brutal. When they went in to remove the kidney, unfortunately it was very, very vascular, and he had some complications. They nicked his spleen, and while still in the hospital post-op, his spleen ruptured, and so he went through a lot. And very honestly, that is a big part of all the complications that he had for the ongoing years. His prostate cancer was kept in check. Originally, he was 57 years old, and so he was suggested that he went down to Mount Sinai in Memorial Sloan Kettering, in New York for a clinical trial, that he could then receive drugs at Dana-Farber Hospital. So that's kind of what it all started. So he had chemotherapy which the drugs that he had in 1998 are now the gold standard treatment, which he was very proud of, that he was able to help and participate with that, though he couldn't finish the clinical trial because he had DVT. One of the drugs, I believe it was estramustine, causes potential blood clots, and so he was only able to do 16 of the 24 weeks of the clinical trial, but was on hormonal therapy throughout the 20 years and also received radiation treatment. His diagnosis was late. Though he had a PSA, it wasn't picked up, and so by the time they diagnosed him, it had already metastasized, though nothing on x-ray or bone scan, etc. So the annual scans that he had is what he said saved his life because of the kidney cancer. They wouldn't have found that kidney cancer when they did, had he not had the annual scans. And the lung cancer was diagnosed in 2014 when he was going in for an aortic valve replacement, had to have a chest CAT scan pre-op. So multiple small bowel obstructions and many, many hospitalizations and AFib that was just not always staying in check and very symptomatic. So at the end, we created and wanted to create the end-of-life experience that he wanted, describing the priorities, the process, and how it was the little things that truly mattered at the end. On the left is a picture of us in, I think, about 1995 when we were dating, and 1998 when we got married, because, I don't know, he said his pensions wouldn't go anywhere, and that's your proposal? Are you serious? So we actually had a very quick wedding because he wouldn't accept any chemotherapy treatment until we were married. There's a little story behind that I'll go into. And this is the objectives that she shared and really looking at patient-centered goals. He was a widow. His wife died in a car accident leaving the high school. They were hit by a drunk driver. One of the daughters had just graduated from high school minutes before. And he had 4 children, and so he was diagnosed in March of 1998. And his children at that time ranged from 21 to 28, and I had 2 children that were 8 and 11 at the time we got married. He worked as for a community development authority. He actually traveled over the bridge. We lived in Falmouth, and he traveled over the bridge every day. And I used to call him the social worker of Wayham because a lot of what he did was work with elderly people and try to do some housing rehab and get them services in there. And he also was a tech sergeant in the Air National Guard, which he loved. So we're going to fast forward. That's just a little bit of history just to kind of put some of it in context to know what we were dealing with. 6 adult children, all married by then, and 2018, and at the time 18 grandchildren. So none of which were mine, still not mine biologically, put it that way. They were all mine, but not biologically. So fast forward to 2018 in February. Tom had some groin pain in the fall and was treated with physical therapy because all his scans had been negative. In the end of January, he had unresolved back pain, couldn't come up with what was going on, and they finally did some scans and found that the cancer at this point had spread to his pelvis, his bladder, and his back, causing his pain, hip and bowel issues. Very quickly, because the last scans he had was April of 17, so it was less than a year and they were clean as a whistle. Then he passed away on April 6th, so it really was a 2-month span between the terminal diagnosis, if you will, and his death. And he died at home with hospice care and his family, of which Carrie was a big part. There's so much to do with his story, and I struggle with what to do with his story because there's so much learning that I got as a nurse throughout the 20 years, but that's for another day. We're going to focus on the last few weeks. I think it was about 5 weeks when Carrie got involved. At the time of his terminal diagnosis, it was determined it didn't make sense for him to have to go to Boston all the time anymore, and he needed to switch care. That was a huge change for him. He always felt very safe going to Boston, and he had been going there. He knew everybody. He knew the routine, everything about the place, and had spent more time than any of us could imagine in Brigham and Women's as an inpatient. So he had to change to a local oncologist to help manage his symptoms and support, and he was going to get palliative radiation for the pain management. His medication regime, we started with pain management, ortho issues, and nausea, and they felt was most likely related to his metastasis. We had initially Beata Home Health Services, of course, for a few weeks until that transition to the oncologist, and he finished up his palliative radiation. And then we needed hospice involved. And Carrie at the time was working for a local VNA here that I had worked for in the past. When we went to the oncologist, it was very interesting. Tom was a talker. He could talk more than I could. He could run circles around all of us as far as talking and smiling and all that. When we got into the oncologist's office, I realized that he put his head down and he really wasn't interested in telling his story one more time. And after 20 years, he felt very defeated. He did accept what was happening, but he didn't want to go. He knew his time had come. And so I realized it was really time for me to jump in and tell the story and share what his symptoms were at this point and what we needed to move forward. We had the hospice admission nurse come in, and we were told she was wonderful, and she was. She came, she did her assessment, and he just sat there. Now this is just so unlike him, because I used to have to pull him out of doctor's appointments or anywhere we were most of the time, because he'd be talking with people, finding out all about them. And he just sat there, and I thought, this isn't going well. And it wasn't her fault. She did all the right things. She couldn't make the next planned visit, and so they offered that their new case manager that was orienting was going to come in. Entrance, Carrie. They had an immediate connection, and then I knew it would be okay. And then we had an immediate connection. And as I mentioned, a nurse of 30 plus years advocating for a man for 20 plus years, I wasn't going to give this over too easily, or was afraid to give it over, because I had to put a lot of trust in somebody else for a change. Not that I didn't trust healthcare professionals, but you know how things happen. Sometimes the communication doesn't always go, and you have to stand up and be heard. So Carrie came in, and I just looked at them. What did you do? What did you do to him?
You know what I did was I walked in and I looked him in the eye, and I saw these beautiful blue eyes and this big bright smile, and I saw a man who was uncomfortable. He was sad. I saw his wife who, you know, I don't care if you're a nurse for 100 years, when that's your person going through all of that goes out the window. So, I mean, that was actually a little bit scary to walk into. As new as I was with that particular company especially. But then when there's a nurse wife, that's just extra scary. But they were just amazing. And you know, sometimes we're not allowed to have favorite patients, right, in the medical field, but sometimes you do. And it was just an instant chemistry, I'm gonna say. Just something special about Tom and Diana. Still, something special.
Well, and then I had to make the dreaded call to the agency. I'm really sorry. I've been on the other end of this how many times? We only want Carrie to come. I knew that that was just something that he needed her, and they made a connection, and that was going to help us get through this. You asked him what he wanted.
So I think sometimes as medical professionals, we forget that our patients are people. You know, we always want to go in and treat symptoms, treat pain and nausea. And I think something that I pulled out of my experience is that we need to know what people's goals are, what people want. You know, I don't go in saying, I'm gonna fix you and make you better. I go in saying, I'm here for a reason. I can't fix you, but I can help you have the best quality of life and be as comfortable as possible for as long as possible. So, you know, that's really what I did there. It's important. It's more than just symptom management. It's learning about who people are and what they want and what their goals are, even if they're difficult goals.
Which they were.
They were.
But you took time to talk to him and get to know him a little bit as a person and who was around us. And there was always people at the house with all of those folks, you can imagine. And so Carrie constantly took the time to get to know us as a family. One thing, he had a big goal. He didn't want to look or act sick. He didn't want anything to look like a hospital. And he had spent too much time in a hospital. So, yeah, that wasn't going to be easy.
No DME, no hospital bed, he didn't want anything. So, you know, and the first thing I want to do is help him be able to get up. If you want to get up and walk to the bathroom still, can I order you a walker so that you could do that without falling over? And it was no. So that was a whole different dynamic there.
And you got a little bit of flack at the office as time went on.
In IDG, you know, as you all know, IDG every other week, and every other week I was asked, why doesn't this man have any medical equipment? Why doesn't he have at least a walker or a wheelchair? You know, get something in there, Carrie. Like, he won't. You know, he does not want to. He flat out refuses.
Because again, he didn't want the house to turn into a hospital. At one point, one of his bucket list items was to go up to the condominium that we have in North Conway, New Hampshire, that we had. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's on the second floor. What if we get all the way up there and he can't make it up the stairs, right? So I'm thinking, what the heck? So I went on Amazon and I ordered like a little mini wheelchair, you know, one of those transport wheelchairs. And I had it sent to my neighbor's house. And you know how many confirmations you get from Amazon? So I was on that computer every day making sure that there was nothing that he could see, because I was just going to stick it in the trunk and it was going to be there if we needed it. So I missed the very last day when it actually got delivered. And he goes, why did you have a wheelchair delivered to the Sullivans? I'm like, oh gosh. So he called up his friend Mike over across the street and he said, oh, don't worry, Tom. He says, I put it all together for you and it's the color of my truck. We're good. So we're going to go up in my truck and it'll be there. And he didn't need it, but it was a little safety mechanism for us. The nurse and the nurse wife, Carrie asked me a lot of questions about what I'd been doing. And she was listening to what was working. And over the coming weeks, we had so many conversations about what he wanted and how the heck we were going to pull it off without any of this stuff. You listened to my ideas, and together we came up with a game plan till the next visit. Because again, we were working with somebody that didn't want just about anything that we had to offer, including a lot of medications and things like that. So it was a lot of working to try to identify how we could meet his goals. Since you then had the relationship, he let you board a walker at one point.
He did. He had a fall in the bathroom, not a fall, you know, a fall. He scraped his arm, and you know, in talking with him, it was still really important that he be able to do things on his own without someone hovering over him all the time. So I said, listen, can you please please let me just order it. You can put it away, keep it folded up, just please. And he agreed to that. And it sat folded up in the corner.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Until, I think, right before he was getting ready to go to heaven.
Yeah, it was right before that, and I said, if you fall at this point, you'll hurt yourself and we won't be able to keep you at home, and I want to keep you at home. But he started, a couple of the doorways, and he's banging the doorways, and I'm thinking, gosh, he's the most coordinated person that I've ever met. What, he's to climb tree, what's going on? And then I realized, it wasn't until afterwards that I realized it wasn't coordination at all. He was not happy that he was using this, and he's banging my doorway. Little rebellion coming out there. And then I told you about the wheelchair that was ordered in secret. The patient-centered goals. He had a short bucket list, thank goodness, because it was a short period of time. He had pretty much tried to do everything he always wanted to do, but he had some specific things. He wanted to go to the symphony. 25 years I'd been with the man and never knew that he wanted to go to the symphony. I'm like, what? You want to go to the symphony? And here's how it used to go. Let's go to Boston for the weekend. Let's do something and, have some fun. What do you want to do? Oh, well, this and that. It always come back to what I wanted to do, except I never realized that, but it was always what I wanted to do. And so we'd go to a musical or different show, but we never went to the symphony. So, again, not an easy task with things sold out at the last minute, knowing that to go to Boston is not going to be too easy. And so he used to drive, as a part-time job, he drove limousines. And, in addition to his full-time job with 4 kids going through college and all. So I decided that we were going to get a limousine. And they said, well, we have 10-seater available. I was like, oh, that's fine. We'll fill it up. Not a problem. But the symphony tickets were a little bit more of a problem because I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot pay that much money for a symphony ticket, I'm sorry. And one of his daughters, who had the means, just jumped in and said, how many do you want? I was like, really? She goes, I said, okay, 4. And then of course we were trying to figure out who to bring, etc. It turned out that we did fill the limousine with a bunch of us, but the tickets went to him and his 3 daughters. And so we all drove up together. We met some other people. We had dinner in the North End, and he went with his 3 daughters, which is great because I really never wanted to go to symphony. Maybe he knew that. I don't know. That I never said I didn't like the symphony, but anyway, so that was one. And the North Conway trip you heard about. Then he wanted to go to his sister's 90th birthday party. And it was getting closer and closer, and I was getting more and more nervous because his energy level. He would have to take a lot of naps in between all the activities. And it wouldn't really be a problem, except that, again, he didn't want to look sick, and he didn't want to act sick. So he always was up like this. And that's how people saw him, right up until the end. The priest that came to give him sacraments of the sick about a week and a half before he died, they talked for an hour. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to be exhausted, somebody else is coming. But he left and he said, oh, Tom, I'll see you in a couple weeks. And I'm sitting there going, I think I have Munchausen. So Carrie comes again. I think I have Munchausen disease. Is he really dying? Because really, nobody sees that but me. The children had a hard time seeing that because he didn't let them see that part of him. And so, again, the small things that mattered was having somebody to bounce things off of, that I wasn't totally losing my mind, and that I wasn't, he really was very ill. And he made it to his sister's party, but again, the hidden wheelchair in the trunk really did come in handy because he was exhausted, but enjoying all the family, the extended family hadn't seen on his side for a long time. And Easter Sunday was April 1st, and he passed away on April 6th. So again, another big, huge event. Again, nobody thought anything different. Tom's doing great. Okay. He also didn't want to go to the hospital ever again. And so we wanted to maximize the time left and had to really schedule it with family and friends. And it turned into nonstop people. But I guess my point with some of this is the goals that he set. You helped me to meet those ongoing, and just from the support that she was giving me. And a huge family. And having respect for anybody and everybody that was at the house. And it could be, oh my gosh, how many people did you meet?
I think I met everybody, everybody. They were all-
But she took the time, every single time, to try to give them some information because they were like sucking the life out of me, trying to get information. And I'd say, I just don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And again, none of this is rocket science, and it's none of it that you may not have heard before, but kind of we thought putting it together in how it really was all about his goals was kind of important to share, you know. You explain to everybody.
Yeah, and sometimes the same person or people over and over again, because you can only retain so much. Again, when it's your person going through all of this, it's like in one ear and out the other. There was a book. Did we get that for you?
Yeah, the booklet. Oh my gosh.
I wish I could remember the name of the booklet that company used, but they're very similar in all of the hospice organizations, and it just breaks down end-of-life signs and symptoms. And I tell everybody that I give it to. It doesn't mean it's going to read, you know, first page to last page. Things change, but it gives that overall big picture of what happens when people start to decline, you know, body changes, not even just physical changes, but emotional changes, withdrawing. Tom he was all over that book because he just was very unique, but that book was helpful. I brought a stack of books.
Oh, she had to bring one after that. I had to give them out to everybody because I couldn't do it anymore. I was focusing on him and how I was taking care of him, and I couldn't do everybody. So that book came in so handy, including for me. It had been probably about a month or so before he was diagnosed as terminal, that he said to me, he said, I don't know, have I done anything in my life? You know, what mark have I left here, or am I leaving in my life? And at the time I was like, what are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how you are with people? I said, you never built skyscrapers, you didn't make $1 million. You were kind to people and enjoyed people every single day, and that's your mark. But he needed to see that. Well, when I get a hold of the book and I'm reading that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So everybody got books, including his 90-year-old sister that, again, this is her much younger brother, was very important to that. And so the multiple copies really came in handy. So again, I was willing to pay for them if I needed more copies, but it made a difference. Refused the home health aid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shocker.
Shocker. I could do it all. We had to, we tried to make it fun, but we had gotten to a point where we needed a different type of chair in the living room. He had never had a recliner, and this was time. So he and my 27-year-old son at the time shopped all over Cardi's. And they found one that had LED lights all over it. It had little cup holders, and it had LED lights, and then along the floor, which to me, I'm like, oh good, fall prevention. You know, you got the lights on the chair in case it's dark in the living room. But what did you say about the chair?
It looked like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And it was his way of hiding his symptoms. You know, he was in that chair every time I went to that house until he wasn't anymore. And he could just be so comfortable there and fall asleep, and you would have no idea really what was going on with him. He actually sat in that chair. I don't even know how long it took before I saw him ambulate. He knew I was coming, and he was in that chair every time. But
There's a reason for that.
Right, he didn't want a walker. He didn't want me to see what was going on, you know. But things that I noticed was he was closing his eyes more within our conversation time, and he just started to look a little bit different. You guys know that look when someone starts to become more changed, you know, within, and I think also he felt comfortable enough around me that he could take those little naps when I was there. He didn't feel like he needed to entertain me or show me that, you know, big smile. He could hide in that big awesome chair and rest.
And again, a small thing, but what it made for was with a lot of the grandchildren, it made it safe to be around him. It wasn't scary, it wasn't bump is sick, it was, oh my gosh, look at this chair, this is great, you know? And so he would spend time, especially with the younger ones, they'd just climb up with him. And again, these are all the small things, but if they're ideas for other people, we thought we wanted to share them. And that you took time to look at pictures, lots of pictures, you know, and saw him changing. Oh, the dilemma of nausea. Well, I can tell you that many people have many different ideas on how you can treat that. It's amazing the things that showed up on my refrigerator. I have no idea where they came from. But we had a lot of laughs over the fact that it's like, please, don't give him any of those brownies. The guy was in the military for his whole career, his whole life. Don't give him that. He's never had that before. But we needed to help with his nausea. And Carrie and I would talk about it the first few times. It became more of an issue. And he had the Ativan?
I think he had everything. He had the Ativan, he had the Compazine. I think he had Zofran too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
We just, you know, we had a conversation and I asked more questions and, you know, he said that it was worse in the morning and, you know, in my head I'm thinking spring's here, you know, it's kind of springtime now and I know my allergies are starting up, so maybe it's post-nasal drip. How about some Claritin, Tom? You know, and this was a man who really didn't want to take any more meds, but he really was tired of being nauseous, so we tried Claritin.
And it's amazing, it was so helpful, such a simple thing. But again, asking more and more questions, and it wasn't until, you know, you really dug into it that we were able to come up with something different that might actually work. Again, a simple thing, but made a huge difference. And I think we've talked a lot about that, you know, the energy that made that happen. Then we get into the pain, and I think it was managed pretty well. He did fairly well on Dilaudid and Tylenol. I'm trying to think what else at the time.
Fentanyl patches.
Yes.
I mean, he was on some pretty hefty narcotics, but we didn't have to mess around with that too much. It kind of
just increased it a little here and there and seemed to manage. And then the comfort pack showed up.
Right.
How exciting was that?
So, and I always tell my patients and families to just put the comfort pack aside. I'll go through everything with you the next time I'm there. And I do. I explain what everything is, what it's for, you know, which dual purpose things that it's going to treat. And Diana's case, when I showed her the Haldol, was like, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Acute care, SNF, home care, it's a chemical restraint. Sorry, I'm just not really paying attention to what you're saying about the Haldol, because we're not using that. There's just no way. And we ended up using the Haldol. I had heard the term terminal agitation, but I really never knew what that meant. But when you sat down with me, and so this was probably Wednesday, he died Friday night. So Wednesday, you went over everything, including the Haldol again, and actually this time you drew up some for us. And again, my face is like, yeah, okay, we're not using that. We're not gonna do this. Now, interestingly enough, this is a man that had post-op delirium for many of his post-op surgeries, so I don't know why I was so resistant, but that in my head it was a chemical restraint, and that I wasn't going to do that to him. But we had a lovely experience. But we went through it.
So she was describing to me. It says steak and cheese on there. There was a mood change when Tom he loved steak and cheese subs. I mean, those were his favorite. I think they were his favorite. He always talked about them. And he had a mood change one day, and it was quick, it was sudden, and I talked to Diana about how I thought maybe it was some terminal agitation. And I know you hate Haldol, but you know, I see certain trends in some of my patients, my veterans. I see my first responders, like police, fire. I often see terminal agitation at end of life with these folks. Obviously liver any kind of liver with that ammonia buildup too. And with his history of the post-op issues with the anesthesia, I had a feeling it was going to happen, so, you know, after that, she tried the Haldol. She didn't really want to try the Haldol, but she tried the Haldol.
I kind of had to try it. He had woken up in the middle of the night and hadn't, you know, the steak and cheese is quite interesting because he hadn't eaten much that whole day and was eating a lot of like ice cream and soft things, mashed potatoes. And then everyone was there and ordered steak and cheese for dinner, and he got really pissed that we didn't order him one. And that was just so unlike him to get aggravated about anything. He would have made a joke about it and scoffed up a few people, you know, if it, in another time. But it still didn't see that that was a big issue. He woke up in the middle of the night and was asking for his sister, and who had passed away in 2004 from ALS. And I said, no, is Mimi here? No, Mimi's in heaven. Okay, all right. So I was cued into, he was starting to not be sure where he was and all. And I wasn't sure, my sister kind of heard some activity and opened the bedroom door and said, looked at him, should I call the kids? And I thought, I don't know, I don't know yet, let's just sit on this for a little while. But eventually I did, because again, the little things, right? So I'm the stepmother of 4 of them and all their spouses and children, and my 2 were very close to him, and I thought, if it were me, I'd want to be here. But I also knew that he had enough. He was exhausted. So anyway, we decided to call them, and a couple of them came rushing in, and he was so confused. And we finally got him up to the chair and had a cup of coffee going and sitting and just started to relax. And I thought, this is going to be a long day. I'm going to jump in the shower. I'm not going to wash my hair, guys. I'm just going to jump in for 2 seconds and just, if he gets agitated again, I need somebody who's going to volunteer to just squirt this into his cheek. Oh, I'll do it. Okay. All right, so I don't think I was in the shower 30 seconds maybe, and there's banging on the door, and so I'm running out, and I mean, now he's swatting me, but again, you get to a point, okay, you know he's got to have it, and so I just gave it to him. Again, not the greatest feeling, because we always talk through things and it was something, but I knew I had to do it. And it did help. I have to admit that. It did help over the next couple days. So again, just our story of how the challenging things came in. And the day before and after that, I knew that the crowd control needed to happen. It was too much. I got very protective and realized that nobody else, he can't do it anymore. He cannot raise that face and make that smile and cajole them. Because every time one of those kids came in, it was saying goodbye all over again. Every time they left the room, somebody was in tears. I mean, it was just, and again, this isn't anything you haven't seen, but it's like how did Carrie help me get through that was really remarkable. And it was just her being supportive and just being there and knowing that I had somebody for me too. So I kicked everybody out, and then I realized that there was nobody to help me anymore, and he was getting weaker and weaker. So Carrie comes in Friday morning, and he hadn't talked anything since the night before. And again, I was texting the kids. Thank God for texting. Again, another little thing that who would think, right? I had my iPad and my phone in my room, and I texted, it's like, can someone leave me a cup of coffee outside? Because there was I don't want to say there was a lot of jealousy, but I was going to set it up. If one of my kids brought stuff in the room, and so that was it. Nobody was coming in. And so Carrie shows up, and he hadn't talked to anybody. And he's laying there, and I said, Tom, your nurse Carrie's here. It's like this, and he opens his eyes and goes, hi, honey. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? So, and she and I have obviously digested all of this. I had to know like what she was thinking, what I was thinking afterwards. I needed to figure out where all that was coming from. And she said, he knew I didn't need anything from him. I was there for him and not needing for him to give me anything. And again, another huge revelation for me, realizing that we were all taking from him and she was giving to him. Whoever thinks you're a nurse, really, I mean, you give, but how do you internalize that? Oh, we'll step to that one. Unfortunately, Carrie couldn't be with us at the very end, but again, needing the hospice people. I had been around people toward end of life before, in acute care, etc. But at the end, who knew that sitting up, to me, CHF, right? You're sitting up and all that fluid and stuff, you're trying to get it to your lungs. And the nurse that showed up that night said, we're gonna lie him on his side and I'm gonna let this drain out. Again, so you think you're a nurse. My daughter was a nurse. I even was texting her, I was like, what do I do? Because he's in distress now, he's in distress and I don't know what to do. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 37 years and I don't know what to do. And that little conversation with that nurse was like, I want you to lie him on his side. Don't let him, he doesn't need to sit up anymore. Put a little towel underneath and let the fluid drain. Because what's that drug? Wasn't working.
Levsin. No,
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
It didn't work. I mean, we tried it and we tried it and it didn't work. So, anyway, she stayed with me, knowing how that he was toward the end, And what they say about when someone's not paying attention, darn it, that was not going to happen to me. And you know what? It did. Because the nurse stayed and she and I got yakking a little bit and I was there, but I wasn't there. I had a really hard time with that. Carrie helped me with that because for months, I wanted to be there for him. And yet, you kept saying, and we're going back to the book, it's when you're not there, when you're not paying attention, they can let go. And so that is what happened. But I was having trouble with that for the longest time. Obviously still am. But we were there, and you helped me through that afterwards. It was afterwards that she helped me with all this. One thing she didn't help me with, so this is a little tip. May not or have. I don't know about any of you guys ever heard this before, but Tom's first wife, you heard she died in a car accident. She was buried at the National Military Cemetery here in Bourne. We'd been up there a million times. I made flower arrangements, holidays, all this, okay? So it's not a really good picture, but her name and his is on the stone. And then his is the temporary marker. So at the military cemetery, you can't go to the gravesite, or you don't go to the gravesite that day. They have the little shelters, they call them, commitment shelters, and that's where you go and then you leave from there. So the next day the kids went up with me and we brought more flowers and all that fine, blah, blah. And then I went by myself for the first time. Now, you're gonna be emotional, right? What I didn't expect is the hysterical reaction that I had. It was the first time in 25 years, 26, that I felt jealous of his dead wife. Crazy, right? No, it's not, but who told you that? Anybody prepare you for that? You got all these books and all this other stuff. That was something that didn't prepare. So I got home. Well, thank God I got home. My son talked me down, and it's lucky I picked up the phone because I wasn't going to, after. And he's like, whoa, what's going on? I'm like, oh. And because I ran from the site to the car, and again, not my typical response to things. And so he talked me down enough that I got home, and I called the bereavement guy. I was like, Rick, guess what just happened to me? He goes, oh. I said, what? Oh? I said, get your books out. I said, call a professor, what the heck, So I guess my one big tip that maybe someone didn't realize is if it is a second marriage and they're going to be buried in the same place, you might want to help the person prepare for the response they might have. Because I never felt jealous of her. I knew her. I respected her. She was the mother of those children. I mean, the whole thing. And yet, I became hysterical. So that took me a while to come down from that, because they called Carrie like, oh my God, do you know what just happened to me? This is crazy, you know? But that's something you might help people prepare for, that it wasn't in the book.
Well, actually, it's still in the book. But it's in my head
It's
now.
in your head now. And the cemetery folks had called me like a day or two later and said, oh, Mrs. Molloy, just want you to know that, there is room for you there. What we would do is lower Tom, and, I'm like, oh yeah, can I get back down that? That's where I want to be. Not sure that that's where I want to be. We'd like to hear a couple of your stories, if you have them, of things that maybe it's the little things that really did matter to families and folks. So if you have something you'd like to share, I'd like to open up, and or if there was something that you picked up in this that, again, it's not a rocket science story. It's a very common story, I'm sure, but that connection, you can't get that in PDGM, or you can't get that in reimbursement and in documentation. And that is the piece that we don't want to ever lose in what we're doing, because that's what we know makes it truly, truly special to people, that relationship piece. Yes?
So first of all, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. It was absolutely beautiful. And thank you to Carrie for supporting her through that inner, the work that we do as hospice clinicians. I'm a hospice nurse myself, so it's just amazing every day. And I think sometimes we lose sight of what we do on a day-to-day basis when we're just going through the motions of the day. And your story definitely shows, the hard work that we do and why we do what we do as hospice clinicians. So thank you for that. I would say one story that I have that I share with my new nurses that I'm bringing through orientation is a patient that I had. She was 32 years old. She had been living out in California, was diagnosed with breast cancer, very aggressive form at like 28. Had been visiting over the holidays to her family in Connecticut, and had taken a very big turn for the worse. And now we're talking about hospice, and we're talking about hospice being only involved in a few days. So we had to do a lot of work very quickly to get her home, get her comfortable, and get her bucket list, completed. So we very instantly put in daily nursing, social work, all the, bells and whistles of hospice, we deployed very quickly. I happened to be her nurse because at that time, nobody was really comfortable taking care of somebody so young. I said, I'll take that case on because it's going to be heavy. And I've had experience like that in the past. So I was seeing her every day. And the first day I went out there, she wanted maternity underwear. Okay, whatever makes you happy, honey. Like, I'll bring you some. And she did not want to have any pain medication. So she allowed equipment, which was helpful because of her bucket list. But she wanted to be awake as possible so that she could visit everybody. And she wanted to die at a lake. I live in Connecticut, we have a lot of lakes there. So her mom's best friend said, okay, you can come down at my house. It's on the lake. It was absolutely beautiful. They had her room set up right there with the lake view and everything. And her family's like, don't come in and give her, don't give her more things. I said, I respect that. I'm just going to put it in the fridge in case you need it later, And they did end up having to use a little bit, she got a little bit labored right towards the end. But she was able to be wheeled out towards the lake, got to sit outside, feel the sun on her face one last time. Her other bucket list was to be dressed in like nice stuff. She didn't want like hospital gowns or anything like that. So And it was kind of amazing, the group of women that were kind of caring for her, and the men were doing all the cooking, and it was just this house full of people, and that's the way she wanted it. Like, her life had been lived always as a party. She did pass with nobody by her side. Her mom, we had to work through some similar issues that you felt at the end of I wasn't there. So we talked through that and supported her, and ended up actually being one of the most beautiful deaths I think and I was actually able to pronounce her as well. She died at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and they waited until on-call was done so that I could come. And it had actually been a snowstorm too, so they were like, you know, we're just hanging out and eating breakfast, like, get here when you can. I'm like, okay, you know. And it was just one of the most beautiful experiences that I had as a hospice clinician for somebody so young, but we were able to do so much in such a short amount of time for her.
That's awesome.
But
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
thank you for sharing that. It was a beautiful story. I would be interested in when you sort of took charge and sort of evacuated the family. It's not, you just kind of glazed right over that. I have a huge family. My mom's in hospice care. And so I'm really paying attention to that because I think that may happen. And I see the performance of trying to act like everything's okay, so people leave and they say, she's okay, or you are crazy, she's okay. So how did that go when you sort of shut it down?
Yeah, not well initially. It was not a popular decision.
Was it okay later?
Huh?
Did it work out okay eventually?
It did, and I think everyone understood at a certain point. And matter of fact, Alex, my videographer, I asked him, because I want the children to be able to see this and understand kind of what was going on behind the scenes. But his mom, my sister, was in the kitchen the whole week before. She parked herself there, she had her computer there, and she did crowd control. And so it was important also, the conversation she and Carrie had, because she was then able to relay a lot of information to the kids, because I wasn't at that point really talking to anybody else, and I had kind of like shut down on everybody else that I knew I needed to just take care of the most important patient I've ever had in my life. And so, yeah, it didn't go well, but in the end they understood it. And again, I referred everybody back to the book, and you were referring them to the book.
I told her, blame it on me, say Carrie
Yeah.
said no. I'll take all of it.
He couldn't do it anymore. He needed to let go, and he couldn't do it with all of them coming in. And yet, so they got to a point where everyone was in the dining room all the time, you know, whenever everyone worked different shifts and this and that, but they were okay there. And then, you know, the nurse that night, I said, you know, she said, I'll help you get him dressed. And I said, oh, great, and that'll be a big help. And she said, and I said, and because the minute we opened that door, all hell was gonna break loose. And one of his youngest daughters had a pretty hysterical reaction. She was only 16 when her mom died traumatically. And so I knew that it was gonna be, I needed to help her. The nurse that was there at the end, I mean, I can't even believe what she was doing. And I was kind of watching it because I was fascinated that she was trying to, you know, get the meds and put them in coffee grounds, and then the doctor was calling back and she was writing out the death certificate, and there was, you know, people everywhere by this time. They were all there, and, you know, it's midnight, and it was a little chaotic, but she just kept going about doing her thing. And when she left, I said, I can't tell you how impressed I am that you did all of that and didn't get flustered or anything. And she said, I just love what I do. And I was glad I was here to help, you know, and you feel that connection too. It's like she was there for 2 hours total, and yet you felt like, because there's such an intimate piece of what's just happened. So that unpopular decision, it was horrible. And one of my daughters-in-law, one of his son's wife, is actually a nurse. And I texted them all on Friday. I said, listen, I need some help. I know all of you are going to have a hard time if it's any one of you, and it can't be all of you. So how would you feel if Dee helped me? And so she ended up in Friday evening, a few hours, she came and she helped me turn them and freshen them up and all that kind of stuff. And they were okay with that because she wasn't one of those 6 siblings, so there wasn't that level of jealousy,
Yeah.
you know, but again, those are dynamics that we were dealing with that you're like, really? But they're real feelings, you know, and everybody wanted to be with him, you know? And I think it was just after Easter, I said, no more grandchildren. I said, they've all spent a wonderful Easter day with him, and they've all had one-on-one conversations with him. Enough. He can't do it anymore. He can't do this anymore for anybody else, you know? Yes.
So I just, my father died of hospice a couple weeks ago, and I had a wonderful experience with hospice. But there were 2 things that came up that were sort of interesting, and I'm not a clinician, but I work in the hospice and home care world, and my dad had a private duty aide from the same VNA that was providing hospice, and he had private duty, you know, for 5 years. So we had to also, the private duty aide was very protective of him. She spent all day with him, and yet she was from a different division within the hospice agency. So you know, as he was dying, her role, she felt she needed to be with him and protect him all the time, and we needed to say, this is family time. And it was hard for me to go in and say, can you please give us some space? You know, so I had to share with the hospice nurse that said, could you please just let her know what her role is and when she needs to back off, because that was actually created a little bit of tension.
Sure.
And then the other thing that I thought was just really helpful for a family member was that the day he did pass, the hospice nurse, it was a weekend, so it was the weekend nurse who warned me. She said, after she pronounced him, she did tell me, she said, when the hearse comes, she said, I don't care how prepared you were for this, it's going to be really hard when they take him out, so maybe you don't want to be here. And that was so valuable to me. I just went out in the backyard and sat by the garden. I just said to my sister, you can be here if you want. If not, let your husband do it, but I will not be in the house when they take him away. And I thought that was a real gift from the hospice nurse to share that with me. It wasn't anything that wasn't in the book. Right. Nobody had warned me about that. I was like, oh yeah, the funeral director's going to come. And I was so glad that I wasn't there.
Well, because he made it so easy for us and no hospital bed, I know we gotta wrap it up, but my funeral director, cousin, said, where are you gonna be, Tom? He's like, is it hospice house? Where? He goes, no, I'm not gonna be in that death room that you built 10 years ago, whatever. So he goes, I'm gonna be upstairs in my bed. And he said, really? He goes, have you seen your staircase to the 2nd floor? And I said, yep. And he's like, okay. So he shows up that night and with another guy, and thank gosh, some of the kids were there, because he looked at me, I said, I know, what can I say? He's still in the place he told you he was going to be, and I will help you. You don't have to climb on my king-size bed to, you know, help roll him and all. I said, just do it fast. And take his slippers because his feet are always cold. But I wanted to just quickly share, we did a lot of stuff afterwards. I needed to process, and I did. I had to understand where Carrie, how did she know I'd need the Haldol and all that kind of stuff. I needed that for me, whether it be my nurse piece or my white piece, I'm not really sure, but it was a mixed thing. But with the kids, I didn't quite know how to deal with all that. So I actually, and it's just an idea, a lot of people have done it, I did a home memento day. It took me weeks to split up all his little things, everything from, you know, pocket knife to binoculars, who would get this and that, and some of the things that him and his wife had from Ireland and blah, blah. But I did a memento day, and I surprised the kids, and we all got t-shirts. And one of the things that was really key about the whole thing is attitude is everything, and that's how he went into all this, was with that positive attitude, and that's how he got through 20 years, because there's no way with the codes that he had and everything else that he should have lived that long. Attitude is everything. So, Carrie, and probably I ended up Vistaprint, I don't know how many orders I ended up making, because people kept, I got them for the family, and then people that felt close to him kept asking for t-shirts. So there's quite a few floating around the world, and there's just little things, but you know, there's a picture and you can't really see it well, but it's all the grandsons, the son-in-laws, my son and everybody with suspenders. One of the grandkids said to me, Dana, can I wear a pair of bumper suspenders? Because he had this hernia from all the surgery, blah, blah. And I said, oh, Dempsey, that'd be great. You guys don't have to wear jackets to the wake, blah, blah. Let me see. We might have to go to Walmart and get a bunch. Who knew? Who knew? There were 22 pair of suspenders in one drawer. The guy had them in every single color, every single color. Anyway, thank you. I know our time is up.
Well, thank you.
I hope it was helpful.
Everybody in this room, we truly admire your courage for being able to share your story. And Carrie, for you being here for Diana and for the family. And you know, we all have experienced, I'm sure, personal situations in our lives that bring forth thoughts that, you know, as you've done. And those of you that are caregivers and the hospice nurse, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but that you actually are providing care every day, it's so important to always make sure that that patient is the center of everything. And find ways, as difficult as it is with huge families, with dysfunctional families, with no families, but trying to help that bucket list. But you did an amazing job. Thank you so much. We're going to the exhibit hall for